So let's start with, so like there's access, availability. Maybe I stumbled onto it accidentally. And yes, we know women can also have issues with porn, but we are kind of bounding it a little bit today to men, since that's the clientele you work with. But so there's availability, accessibility. I see something that kind of overwhelms my senses, kind of takes it to the next level, really hits the dopamine thing, a reward system. I'm like, woo, bells and whistles will go off. Maybe we've talked about, I've seen a lot of autistic and anxious individuals use masturbation and pornography as a self-soothing, because that kind of goes back to what you were saying developmentally. If I didn't learn how to properly soothe and regulate my feelings, I am more prone to this type of behavior, or alcohol or drugs or something else that I'm relying on to soothe and regulate me, instead of kind of doing the work to identify my feelings and regulate. And we know that with autism being a developmental issue, this is just one of the things, or the criteria is the lack of development in that area. And then if you're early exposed or have trauma, that's going to set you up too. So when does it move from this, I overloaded my brain, into an addictive? And I really want you to talk about binge and purging, because I see that the most with my Christian men. So when does it cross into addiction, from like, this is something I shouldn't be doing, and I know I shouldn't be doing it, but now it's more of an addictive behavior?
Okay, so I've got kind of two broad answers to that. So technically, addiction involves what you just described, that reward center.
Okay.
Hitting the pleasure, there's some enjoyment, there's some desire, for enjoyment, to get the hit. Um, uh, but addiction also involves on the backside compulsion. Now, compulsion, a classic compulsion, it's not fun. People who are compelled to wash their hands, 60 times a day, they're not enjoying that. They do it because if I don't do it, the anxiety, that will build up so much that I can't really focus on anything else. So they do it for the relief of it, for the relief of not doing it. An addiction has both that impulsive, pleasure seeking component, and then over time it becomes, if I don't do it, like it becomes really stressful for me. And so sometimes people will engage in behavior so I can go to sleep, right? It's paired with kinds of things. So I can go to sleep, so I can get a break from stress, so I can change my mood, right?
Or I feel justified because my wife isn't giving me enough sex, and I feel like I'm justified to be able to do this.
You know what? I don't know that drives people to it. I think that's the excuse that we use, to stay in it. There's a thing, the sort of the father of the entire field of sex addiction recovery, porn addiction recovery, is a man named Patrick Carnes. And when I was doing my training, he said one of the most profound things, that is, after many, many years of working in this field, I find it to be so true. And it's that sex addiction, porn addiction, is an illness of self-delusion. Okay. And so you build up this sense of lies, cognitive distortions that you tell yourself that justify.
It's not that bad. It's only one time. I mean, I've heard people say, well, if I don't masturbate, then it's okay. If I watch without masturbate, or if I masturbate and just think about old scripts, that's not the same thing. Like, they become these like little guidelines in my head that I make it okay for me one more time.
Yeah, exactly with that. And so if it takes a while for if I don't do this, I'm gonna have to feel something or deal with something I don't want to deal with. Or, you know what, that is so incongruent with my values. And yet I did these things and I've been doing them over and over. Wow, I feel a lot of shame about that. If anybody found out, and you know what, turns out I don't like feeling shame. Nothing in life has prepared me to really adequately, in a healthy way, deal with feelings of shame. So I can't stay there very long. So, you know how I escape? I get back in my head, start getting preoccupied. I get back in my cycle. And so now this little tiny, maybe so brief, I don't feel it anymore, pocket of shame, or feeling like negative consequences, hangover, so to speak. Now that's actually part of the cycle. And so I just stay on this loop over and over and over. with that. So when is the magic moment when that happens? I don't get super caught up in trying to define the magic moment because it's elusive. But you and I both know that our profession is, in essence, is a cookbook. If you have enough ingredients, you're a cake. We know that the cookbook periodically changes. Okay? We know that sometimes it really gets behind, what the research says. But in essence, it's a recipe. And if you have enough of the ingredients, so there are 10 symptoms associated with sex addiction. And when you meet the criteria for 3, that's the moment that we can say you've got enough ingredients. Most of the people I work with, figuring out the exact moment it crossed over and became addiction isn't so relevant to them, because they will say, you know what, it really began at 11. The elements of that, if I keep at this, I'm going to be hooked, we're kind of there for the get-go.
Like ground zero. So maybe the person, because this is a common story I might hear, early onset, exposed to it against their will. And then like, okay, I prayed and I told the Lord, and if I just get married, this isn't going to be a problem anymore, and get married, and it's okay for a little bit. And then it kind of springs up again under stress or pregnancy or first child or job, or something happens. There's a transition, there's a stressor. And then that thing that was planted a long time ago that I really thought I had overcome maybe. And I really thought was no longer an issue. And I think that's kind of, I don't want to downplay prayer and deliverance, because those are very important things, and people have had legitimate experiences through prayer and deliverance. But I think with this binge and purge thing that I really want you to explain a little bit more, it's like, well, it wasn't a problem for me. I was kind of celibate or not acting out for 10 years. And now I am again. Oh, and I've gone 3 months. Okay, I've done good. Now I've gone 6 months. I'm overcome. I'm delivered. I'm delivered. But explain like this binge and purge cycle that you see with your clients.
So I do want to say one thing before I explain binge purge. There's a Russian proverb that I think is it's phenomenal wisdom. And it's pray to God, but row the boat.
Like that.
And I see a lot of people who pray, but they don't.
Prayer and.
Yeah, God's created this process for us to kind of dig ourselves out, but you do have to pick up the shovel and start with that. You have to actively participate. A binge purge is, if you use the analogy of food, right? A binge is, I'm going to eat a great amount of food in a short period of time. And if I do that over and over and over, that's a binge cycle. If I also add on a purge, which for somebody who's struggling with, say, bulimia, might be I binge and then I induce vomiting, or I exercise for, 6 hours a day, for 2 weeks, or I get into these cycles with alcohol where I maybe only drink on the weekend. And because I only drink on the weekend, I have 3 DWIs, but I only drink on the weekend, so therefore it's okay. That's a really common thing that happens with pornography or sex. Okay. For me, that's one of, that was on the little recipe that you and I talked about. But what happens is, I think because I maybe go for like 3 weeks where and it's not just pornography. Usually it's masturbation and pornography together. And I'm doing that 4 times a day, for 3 weeks in my binge. And then I might go for long stretches where I'm not, engaging in pornography and masturbation at all. Or it's like maybe it's once a week, and then all of a sudden it will really, really escalate. And maybe when it's escalating, that's when I take the risk of my job. I put my job on the line by using work devices. Or I've worked with musicians who are risking their career because they're developing problems with their wrists because of pockets of pornography and masturbation. I've worked with roofers who are are engaging in pornography on the roof while they're working. I still have those same things where there's evidence of a loss of control and a loss of judgment. But because I'm only doing this, I'm only really engaging in a lot of this every 3 months, I think I'm okay. And even when I get busted, right? My wife discovers how much of this is happening or all the lies that I've been telling to hide it. And now I'm in Janice's office. The dilemma around a binge purge cycle is because it's very easy for me to think, well, I can control it when I want to, because I have all this evidence appears where it's not really all that much. And then I feel like, you know what? Because I think when I'm really motivated, I can control this. And I feel really motivated now. And a lot of that recovery stuff, rowing a boat gets tiring and it's kind of boring and it's taking a lot of my time. I don't really feel like I need to really row that boat. I might just sit in the boat. I might go to these meetings that Dr. Janice or Dr. Stephanie want me to go to, but it's kind of like a babysitter because I hear everybody else's story and I think I'm not that bad.
I'm not that bad. I don't do that.
I don't do that. So I don't really get a sponsor. I don't take the work seriously. And so I haven't developed this habit of how to reach out for help. Okay. Because I don't think I need it. And the thing is, an awful lot of early recovery is developing the habit, doing things not because you need to do them, but because you need to have them really in your muscle memory when you do. And so now all of a sudden, here's the binge. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see any signs of it coming. It's like I just fell right off a cliff. And because I fell off a cliff straight down instead of sort of that slow descent, there are other people in my group, my therapist, my wife, if I have a sponsor, my sponsor, or if I have an accountability partner, they don't see signs either because people who binge purge often just fall off a cliff. They don't have the signs weeks earlier that things are starting to happen. And so if I'm a binge purger, I actually need the structure of recovery skills and those practices more, not less. And that's the thing is they don't see it coming and they haven't prepared for it. And because it's a binge, you know what? I'm gonna really work to hide that with that. And so there's often like more secrecy. There are more lies sometimes. There's deception. And wives sometimes get really hurt because I thought he was doing so well.
Right.
Or they get really mad because I could tell he wasn't really doing the work.
How do I trust the change this time?
Yeah. And how do I trust him? Because sometimes binge, and again, I'm stereotyping,
right?
But sometimes binge purge people walk of like, no, I got this kick this time. I can do this and I don't need that. And one of the things that I like to point out, and is one of the available options, free options for people struggling, is there are 12-step programs, and there are 12-step like programs out there. And if you look at the 12 steps, there's something that you never see in any of the wording of any of the 12 steps, and it's the word I. Because addiction is about the illusion of control.
Right.
So when I can do it because I really feel it this time, I've been transformed, you're still in an I mentality. The first word of every step is we, because it takes a village. And
right.
because it's an illness of self-delusion, I call it the I plan, is really stupid. You don't use the same plan for recovery that ran the addiction.
Absolutely. I have a feeling that this is going to cause people to have questions. And so I'm going to have you back on the show. So as we're closing, I want to piggyback on one thing you said and then kind of close with how people with who are trained in sexual addiction therapy, what they need to learn a little bit about autism. Because one of the things you said with autism, individuals sometimes are not aware of their feelings. They're not aware of the stress or the whatever till it's already there. It's part of the interoception issue. It's part of the social context. It's, I don't even know when I'm hungry sometimes, or what I'm working and I haven't even gone to the bathroom and eaten, right? I've blown through some other biological cues. And so that's kind of part of what happens with the binge and purge with the autistic individual. So as we're closing today, what did you do to start being a little more aware of neurodivergence with your training you already had in the field? What are you learning a little bit different to add in the neurodivergent component?
Well, I actually work with, so I have people who work with me who do the early kind of work now with addiction recovery. I tend to work with people who've been in recovery a while, have some skills, maybe have some sobriety, but are also exhibiting a relationship pattern called intimacy anorexia, which is it commingles with porn or sex addiction recovery. So it causes some problems for long-term recovery or deep recovery, because you tend to have to know what your feelings are in order to even know what your real identity is. You can't find authenticity, easily if there are some stumbling blocks. Okay. And with that particular population, I do lots and lots of groups for men who are struggling in recovery for sex addiction and intimacy anorexia. And so for that particular population, as a therapist, as a CSAT, when you recognize that you're missing something, for the people that you're serving, you have an obligation. And as a psychologist, I have a testing background. I can do tests and I can figure out some things that are also problematic and difficult, more difficult, for that population. And then it's my obligation to figure out, how do I help bring awareness to that, and how sometimes the awareness is with the spouse. Here, this is an additional issue that's going on that probably makes it more difficult for your husband to figure out his own feelings, much less be able to attune to yours. And we can add some things in there that help with skill development, but some things are going to be slower. I'm dyslexic. I guarantee you, I have a lifetime of compensatory strategies. And there are certain things I just have to do to keep my brain like on task that's not difficult for other people. It's a reality. I got to row the boat, okay, for that piece. And in some way, Stephanie, you're actually a part of me being on this quest too, because I started to recognize with some, not all of the men that I work with, but with a certain portion, there are additional obstacles. And when I recognize an additional obstacle, I have to change my group. I have to add some things that help with that. And, spectrum disorder came on my radar. And I can test for a lot of things. I can do a screening for spectrum disorders. And if that's the case, I can refer somebody to you or other people who do that full testing. But as I started doing that, I realized I've got people with some autistic, perhaps subtle, but autistic traits in my groups. It's my obligation to start learning about that. It's my obligation to start bringing in, because I do a very tool kind of based group. I got to start adding in some tools that help bridge those gaps. And I also have to start letting the spouse, with my client's permission, say, hey, it's not just that I'm not into my feelings. It's not just that I don't care about yours. I have to let them know that there's some obstacles and so some things are going to be slower. Some things can be compensated for. Some things can't. And despite the really deep pain for a woman who has been betrayed, it's almost when you see your husband's eyes somewhere else, not on you. Mm-hmm. It's for somebody who so deeply needs some empathy and connection to help heal her wounds. We have to be realistic about that. There's going to be an obstacle. That's actually, that's hard to accept, but your husband's going to have to work to be able to increase his tolerance, right, for doing that. And it's not a fun thing to learn these additional, there's these other obstacles. But if you're not aware of that, you have unrealistic expectations. And then she's getting hurt more when he actually might be working really hard but the pace of growth is going to be slower.
Because they also need then the relational connection skills in addition.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel, again, I think we're going to get some questions. So I'm going to want to have you back. So thank you so much for being on the show. And in the show notes, you're going to see how to contact Dr. Janice because she does work across many states. So please look her up if this seems interesting to you or this seems to fit some of the things that you're going through. Please contact her. So thank you so much for being on today, Dr. Janice.
Can I just add a challenge to my fellow CSATs?
Sure.
Because there's a quote by Maya Angelou: "When you know better, you do better."
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know better until the last couple of years, and circumstances forced me to say, "Oh, I've got to be a really good CSAT. I've got to add this to my mix." Can I challenge? Some of my fellow CSATs or some of my fellow sex addiction specialists to maybe make this as the year you add one training. And then when you know better, you'll probably want to do better.
Thank you. For all of us who are in the helping field, we got to fill in the gaps where we're learning new things. The last thing I'll add is one of the researchers I looked up said that people on the spectrum are 9 times more likely than a neurotypical person to have some sort of addiction. And we know that addictions can kind of commingle and co-occur. So thank you for that challenge. Listeners, there might still be time if you're wanting to join one of Dan and I's classes. Go to holmesasr.com or Christian Neurodiverse Marriage. This is the last week to sign up for the fall classes. And we always like to remind you that there is hope for your future and you're not alone on this journey.